And as part of this committee, I have the opportunity to work with fellow leaders, including Mike, Anne, Feggy, Vince, Delia, and others. So I really appreciate all the cooperation and the efforts that went into it as we are trying to shift from our conventional in-person meetings onto virtual setups, virtual panels. So I appreciate the opportunity. And with that, I want to welcome our panel speakers today. And I will provide the introductions for each of the speakers in the same order in which they will be presenting later, that is aligned with our panel agenda today. Our opening speaker is Mr. Brian Widener. He's a city forester for the city of San Diego, and he leads up their urban forestry program. Brian is notorious for, no, he's famous for his recent work with the Long Branch Torrey Pines project, where he has been collaborating with the Ocean Beach residents there in terms of managing and maintaining mature trees that garnered a lot of media attention. And as you know, the city of San Diego has a very aggressive climate action plan where they envision increasing the urban tree canopy coverage to 35% by 2035. We are currently between 15 and 20%. And Brian is instrumental and playing an integral role in the implementation of these projects. The next speaker we'll have is Mr. Alvin Papa. Alvin is a city engineer for the city of Long Beach, and he leads up their engineering bureau and the city's $55 million annual capital improvement program. The city's CIP comprises of both gray infrastructure projects like your pump stations, storm drains, pipes, and drainage structures, and also green infrastructure project that comprises of green streets, including trees, low impact development solutions, bioretention strategies. And Alvin has over 20 years of public works experience, and he has championed the effort of securing over $60 million in funding for both transportation and stormwater related green street projects. We also have Ms. Susie Wiest. Susie is leading up the marketing team for Village Nurseries, which is now part of Tree Town USA. Susie has an extensive background, extensive experience and understanding of plant genetics, where she's a regular at ASLA workshops, where she's sharing her insights with the design community in terms of the right plants and the right tree selection for urban street application. And she has hands-on field testing experience where she's exploring what are some of the future candidates of trees and plants that could work within these various applications. And then we have Mr. Sean O'Malley, who's the managing principal of SWA Group's Laguna Beach office. SWA is a global leading landscape architecture, urban planning and design firm. And Sean is joining us with over 35 years of experience and possesses a multidisciplinary skill set of building both sophisticated and sustainable urban design solutions. Sean is stimulated by prioritizing the use of dynamic ecological frameworks as we are planning and designing our physical environments. So he's also an active member of ASLA and Urban Land Institute, the Global Exchange Council. So I'm really thrilled to share with you and share our excitement and invite our panel speakers to the discussion today. And I also like to lay a quick layout of our panel agenda today. Our topic is exploring green infrastructure solutions to build sustainable urban spaces. And upon introductions, we'll have Brian come in to share his insights on how, role of agencies such as City of San Diego, as they are envisioning how urban street trees would look, in future. And while they are envisioning, what are some of the deep challenges that they're navigating through, in terms of COVID-related economic downturns or the distance economy that we are all part of, where we have staff and the workforce working remotely and planning for their safety and wellness. And then it's great to have perspectives from our neighboring beach cities, both the cities of Long Beach and Laguna Beach, where they'll share their recent stories, recent successes with green street type projects, and mainly how these projects can address multiple objectives in terms of bringing communities together and bonding, creating that bond and spurring that economic.
Oh, I'm so bruised these.
Sorry. Then we have pedestrian-friendly street. So
it was from sailing. I jumped off the boat and
you're good, Vince? Great. So it's great to hear, you know, channeling perspectives from our neighbors here in Orange and Los Angeles County. And then, as I shared, you know, now that we have made the case for urban street trees, we want to know what really works. So we want to hear from Susie, you know, the tried and true trees, and also the future candidate opportunities that we could explore and discuss. And then I'll come back to share, you know, role of technologies like silver cells on how it could help promote healthy tree growth and manage full stormwater compliance. So before I go on and hand it off to our opening speaker, Brian Widener, I want to share a quick video, a 1 minute long video that is meant to be a call for action for each and every one of us here on this meeting. And I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
Hey, Pavitra, we're not able to hear the audio. Do we want to maybe put a link into the chat so we can move on to the presentations?
Okay. Oh, sorry about that, that you're unable to, so you don't see the video?
We see the video, we can't hear the audio though.
Oh, okay. Let me see if I can do something.
Maybe just in the interest of time, we put a link to it in the chat,
Yeah,
and people can
sure.
read it later.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be happy to share that. Yeah. It's Greta Thunberg, you know, our famous climate activist. So I'll be happy to share the link. So I'll pass it on to Brian.
So you're gonna unshare yours. There you go.
Thank you, Pavitra. And what a great panel of speakers. Again, I'm Brian Widener, San Diego City Forester. I manage and direct the San Diego Urban Forestry Program citywide. I am housed under the Transportation and Stormwater Department, which manages the street trees, but I work very closely with the Parks and Rec Department as well as many other departments throughout the city in order to manage and maintain and promote our urban forest. So I will dive in here, just bear with me. And today I'm going to talk about navigating the recent challenges in our urban forestry program. And just for a background, the City of San Diego Urban Forest has about 220,000 street trees. We think that we have about 600,000 trees in parks. And then according to a recent US Forest Service analysis of plot data throughout the city of San Diego, we think that we have possibly about 5 million trees throughout the city of San Diego, both on public and private property. And then I always like to point out, you know, the urban forest is not just about trees, it's also about people. We have 1.4 plus million citizens in San Diego. And then citywide, our team, we have about 7 certified arborists. A majority of them are tree risk assessed qualified. And under transportation and stormwater, this department gets about 5,000 requests every year for tree maintenance services or tree planting requests. Let's see. There we go. So the pandemic in the US hit about mid-March, early March. Maybe some folks would say it hit in February, and we know that in other countries such as Italy, Japan, Korea, it hit earlier in the year. But for us, everything seemed to come to a head about the middle of March. And I was not here. I was somewhere else. I was in Spain. My partner and I had made the decision to go to Spain about, I don't know, a few months before March. And then when our trip came up, I think it was about March 8th, we debated on whether we wanted to go or not, because we could sort of see this escalating. But there was no travel bans to go to Spain. So we took off, landed in Madrid, went to Barcelona, which has an amazing urban forest, which I can talk about at a later date. Went to a couple of other towns, and then it hit, there was a warning for us to get back into the United States, change our flights. We actually made the decision at the Barcelona airport to continue our vacation and take a plane to Sevilla, which was an amazing city. We spent a couple of days there while we tried to change our flights. I don't know if you can see the picture here on the right, but their city center had a bunch of orange trees. And their orange trees were probably about 30, 40 feet tall, at least the mature trees. So that was a pretty amazing thing to see for a street tree. I was taking a lot of Advil those 2 days that we were there because a lot of these trees were flowering and giving me a headache. But it was quite an amazing experience. So anyway, we got back from Spain. We had to self-quarantine for 14 days. That was the rules. And so that greatly affected my job and affected really our operations here in San Diego. Luckily, we had begun using mobile units to track our work and perform some of our work in the field. So we used this G-Tech laptop to perform that work. And the great thing about this device is that, we can also do regular work with Microsoft Word, Excel. We can access our desktop computers. So basically I called my coworker and he dropped off the mobile unit and I was able to work from home for 14 days. I was probably actually one of the first city employees to work from home. So the two reasons that we began to slow down and in some cases stop some of our operations in mid-March was we were concerned about the safety of our employees. Most people were sent home to try to work from home remotely. For those folks that worked in the field, such as our in-house tree crews, they were sent home with pay. However, we only allowed a couple of folks from the team to come into work on a weekly basis. We changed that pretty quickly. About a few weeks down the road, we decided that we were going to have our full tree trimming crew in the field doing the emergency and corrective work for our street trees. Second reason why we began to slow down or stop most of our work in March was we started looking at the budget. And I remember in the UT, there was headlines like this: city's officials predicting that we were going to have a drop in sales tax and hotel revenue taxes. And so all of a sudden we were asked to stop all contract work with the exception of essential work. It was tough decisions were made, but we decided that we would continue doing tree removals with our contractor and the occasional emergency tree trim for public safety. Again, the main reason why we had slowed down our operations in mid-March was really for the safety of our employees. So for the remainder of the year after March, we were only able to plant about 10% of the trees that we had planned to go into the ground before the end of June, which was very disappointing. One thing to note too is that we were ready to start planting a few hundred trees under a CAL FIRE grant down in Otay Mesa, Nestor community, right down there next to San Isidro. We just hadn't quite pulled the trigger, and unfortunately we stopped from moving forward with that. And I think it was the right call because we didn't want to stress people out putting brand new trees in front of their houses if they weren't quite prepared for that at that point in time. And I think a lot of people were just, stressed out, a little confused about what was going on with the pandemic. And so I think it was really the right move to make. The good news is that we've actually just recently planted all 300 of those trees down there. So now that part of the project is complete. As I said already, we eliminated proactive tree trimming, and we literally split our in-house tree trimming crew into 2 teams, which we call Team 6 and Team 7, meaning that Team 6 starts at 6 a.m. in the morning and Team 7 starts at 7 a.m. in the morning. And this was done because we wanted to try to keep people separate in separate vehicles. And then we felt like if someone was to get infected with COVID-19, that would probably affect the entire team. So this was our way of kind of keeping everyone somewhat separated and at least having at least one team in place at all times. But the problem with this is that it's slowed down our operations. Sometimes the team might have 3 individuals. Sometimes the team might only have 1 individual. And that's because we've encouraged our employees to use some of the CARES Act funding to take time off when needed for childcare issues and the likes. Good news is Parks and Recreation had more time to complete projects during the last few months of the fiscal year, since most, if not all of the parks were closed during that time. Another bad piece of news is that we had to cancel our citywide Arbor Day event, which was disappointing to me because this was going to be the first year that we were going to hold it outside of Balboa Park and bring it to another community, in particular a community of concern, the Southcrest community in southeastern San Diego. So the proposals for the current year that we're in were to reduce our tree maintenance budget drastically by 75%. Luckily, the community came together to advocate for continued tree maintenance, and that includes folks from the Community Forestry Advisory Board, folks from this Regional Urban Forestry Council were active and vocal, and many folks actually met with the council district representatives throughout the city. So in general here, we got about 95% of our funding back for this year for tree maintenance. And on top of that, this program, the San Diego Urban Forestry Program, specifically asked for additional funding to plant 2,000 more trees. And we got that funding, which is pretty amazing in the sense that most departments and divisions in the city of San Diego had to take some kind of cut for this year, whereas we actually had some slight increase in funding. So today, this is where we sit. More coordinated outreach to the community. We're working on that. Easier said than done. We have reached out to more planting groups and other groups to promote our tree planting efforts. And it hasn't just been my team, it's also been Community Forestry Advisory Board folks, folks from this Regional Urban Forestry Council. And you know, what I always put too is that when I reach out to groups, I talk about our tree planting efforts, but I also emphasize our tree maintenance efforts in the city of San Diego, because there's a lot of people out there that don't want a new tree if they think that the city is not going to maintain that tree throughout its lifespan. We're doing our best to plan for the unknowns during this health crisis. And what we've done is we've just been extra prepared this year. We already have a list to the contractor to plant trees. We've actually already planted 400 trees that we know can be watered by the contractor. So we're moving forward and we're moving fast because we don't know what the future is going to hold in regards to COVID-19 or even the current budget. Again, I've already mentioned this, our response times for tree maintenance have been reduced. I always like to point that out. We try to be responsive as much as we can to the public, but we're a little bit slow right now. We're working from home, and our in-house crews are somewhat limited in what they can do. And then, is it just me? I'm curious to know, is there really an increase in construction projects throughout the city of San Diego and other communities in in the region? I think there is. So what about your community? And I think we'll answer, hopefully we'll get some input from participants today on what other issues you're facing in your community or with your programs. So thank you. And I'll give the presentation back over to Pavitra.
Thank you, Brian. Really appreciate you sharing. Alvin Papa will follow this presentation by sharing his screen. Next.
Right. Perfect. Thank you, Pavitra. If you just give me a second. Can you guys see that? All right, perfect. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I know I only have 10 minutes, so I'll go rather quickly. My understanding is that this is going to be a discussion about the perspective of, City of Long Beach's implementation of green streets, the urban greening efforts that we're doing. But really, I want to talk about kind of my experience. I've been working in the city for the past 4 years. And I've worked in San Diego County, Orange County, Los Angeles County, and it's different everywhere I go. So when I got to Long Beach, there was a vision. I'll talk about the vision that was planned and what I've experienced. I'll talk about a project that's currently in design, and you'll get to see how much of the vision was actually implemented. And then I'm going to share with you what we actually are doing right now, along with, I'm going to conclude at the end with regards to the challenges that we faced, the challenges of implementing kind of the vision, and how we've pivoted and opportunities moving forward. Well, can you hold on for 1 second? It won't let me go to the next slide. Okay, here we go. So I want to talk about Artesia Boulevard. Artesia Boulevard is an important corridor in the city of Long Beach. And we put together a visioning plan for that entire corridor. It's something that we did in conjunction with our Council of Governments. So in Long Beach, we have a Council of Governments we call the Gateway Cities. And there's a number of cities that serve as a gateway to our ports. And we work together to help ensure that commerce is successful in the region. And that includes, doing infrastructure projects, transportation projects, and a series of other things. So there is a committee, and there was a committee put together a plan for visioning for Artesia Corridor, which spans numerous cities. As part of that plan, there are urban greening elements and green streets elements. So this is kind of one of the sheets within the plan where when we look at complete streets, we don't just look at stormwater or urban greening. We also look at transportation where we're just not facilitating cars, but we also need to consider pedestrians and mobility for people on bikes, and also accessibility for people using wheelchairs. And so in this typical example, we look at how can we reduce our traffic speeds, how can we improve the sidewalks, and then where are there opportunities for urban greening? And typically that's within medians. When we ability for us is that for additional green space. And when we put the bulb outs, we typically have to move the catch basin in the area. And when we do that, that's the opportunity to take some of these green infrastructure solutions and connect them to the storm drain. So this is an example of what something could look like in our downtown. This is an example of something that's within an urban area or one of our secondary connectors. Typically, we try to strive for permeable pavers, putting items in the parkway, putting in bioswales, landscape medians. And this document serves as guidance for our engineers. And in the city of Long Beach, our public works department is comprised of about 500 people, and about 100 of them are in the engineering bureau designing projects. And this is a typical residential street, and these are exhibits that we share with our residents, we share with our planners, we share with our different engineers. But as you see, it's typically an element where when we look at designing parkways, we try to make sure that it's walkable. And we look at it at different perspectives. And you'll see in this residential area, we're not able to include bulb outs. And within the document, there's a section talking about what can we do, what are their existing conditions. On the left side, you see our typical catch basin. And when we replace those catch basins, we look at things like linear wetlands. We used to use filteras in the past, but I think we're transitioning away from that. The California, so our regional state board hasn't been recognizing that as helping us with our NPDES permits. So although we do work with developers on identifying low impact development solutions, but we are always looking for new technologies and new ways of implementing green trees. So that's actually how we met Pavitra. She did a lunch and learn for us with regards to Silvacell, because we were investigating new opportunities. And this is just another page of the water quality planning section of the document where, sometimes we use French drains, sometimes we utilize parkway areas, but these all are guidance documents for our engineers. And we're also working on expanding. This is not within the document, but we're looking at additional ways to not just use the linear area within the right-of-way, but trying to identify other locations of opportunity. So this is a portion of Artesia Boulevard located by the off-ramps where Caltrans has those, they've got the big, when you go in and you do the roundabout, well, typically that's filled with ice plant and that's just extra area that's not being utilized. So we look to leverage transportation fundings and identify opportunities. Where can we use, where can we take advantage of these opportunities of areas that's not being used? How can we plant it with urban greening elements, but how can we get that funded? And typically when we get things funded, it's not strictly from a stormwater perspective. We have to look for multi-benefit type projects where how can we connect it to a bike path? How can we connect it to, either passive recreation or put a walking trail through it? And then we also look to develop habitat through wetlands. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. In short, I just want to say that the first few slides these are the type of documents we use to kind of vision how we want to implement urban greening and green streets. I'm going to talk about Market Street. This is a project that's in design now. It's currently in 30% design. It utilizes visioning documents like the one that you saw, but I'll talk about kind of what our engineers are going through now. One thing that we really face is there's a struggle within the right-of-way to have space to do these additional elements. So on the left side, you'll see kind of our existing condition where we have one lane in each direction, and then we have parking and we have a sidewalk that's about 5 foot wide. Well, typically when we do this, we want to try to install a bike lane on complete streets projects. We want to make sure that we have accessibility, but in order to add the greening element, we have to add additional parkway. That's an additional cost. We have to pay for more concrete curb and gutter. We have to relocate those existing curb and gutters. We have to relocate existing utility poles. And sometimes we have to take away a traffic lane. And for us, that's a huge environmental hurdle sometimes, because that's a huge environmental impact and you really have to get the public to buy off on it. So that's kind of been a challenge for us. We have been able to implement some urban greening on this project. So similar to the bulb outs that we did in the past, those are opportunities where we're able to do that. This is an example of one of the locations that we're doing that on this project. And we also have parkways where we were able to do some urban greening and then add trees. And typically we don't, we have a spacing that we have for our trees. So we don't really have that much opportunity to install much new trees unless we're adding additional right-of-way space or there isn't a parkway that exists there already. And typically we put in plant palettes, and when we develop our plant palettes, we're looking at California native, water, drought tolerant species. So just ideas of landscaping. This is another palette that we do. In the city of Long Beach, there's an LA River master plan. They've developed a plant palette, so we kind of use that as a model to develop a plant palette for ourselves. And this last section I want to talk to you about for the next couple of minutes is the LB Must is a project that's actually in construction. And one thing I want to note is, complete streets is something that we've pushed in the past, but when it comes to urban greening, the biggest impact is on regional projects. And I think that's where we're going to be focusing on trying to find those opportunities, and the LB Must is one of those. So the LB Must stands for Long Beach Municipal Urban Stormwater Treatment. For us, this project is a stormwater treatment facility which captures water from the roadway, and it's going to treat about 12,300 acres of land. And so that's about 40% of Long Beach. And normally the water would go from pump station to be pumped into the LA River, but that creates a huge pollution problem for us. So what we're doing is we're going to capture that water and we're going to bring it to this plant for treatment. As part of this project, we plan on collecting the stormwater through the series of existing pipes, but identifying areas for wetlands and bioswales. And it's about an 8-mile length up and down the LA River within Long Beach. And for us, that's a huge opportunity, and that's a big lift. But I think this is the type of project that gets regional significance. It gets a lot of political will behind it. And the best part is it provides us multiple benefits, which I'm going to talk about to you on the next slide. So what you see in the top right-hand corner is kind of an exhibit of what the plant will look like. We don't have funding to build the entire thing right now. That rectangular box in the top right-hand corner, that's actually the treatment facility, and that's what we do have funding for. Our future endeavors are to build a wraparound public space to provide public education. But this project, when I talk about the regional multi-benefits of it, I'm going to explain to you on the left side. It provides us sustainability. It gives us the opportunity to build wetlands, which is urban greening. Those wetlands give us the opportunity to reutilize that water that we've captured. It also, the water that we capture and reuse, it offsets potable water reuse. So that gives us water resiliency, particularly with regards to climate adaptation. Doing a regional project of this scale gives us public education benefits. And then by tying it into existing parts, it gives us the opportunity for open space, creating trails, creating habitat, and community enhancement. So when you look at the bottom, the project is in the middle of that. I don't know if you can see my mouse. There's a little E there. That's actually where the plant is going to go. But we vision from a regional perspective, how can we tie in this project and how can we incorporate changes throughout the entire area instead of just focusing on the linearity of a street. And so this is kind of a street where we're building the project. Where you see that billboard is actually where the plant is going to land. But this is space that's not actively being used. It's underutilized. It's an industrial area. We're going to be tearing out those buildings, or we're going to be building a wetland there. And then we'll be building the Long Beach Must facility to the east of that, or the west of that. And then we'll be putting in walking paths, bike trail, we'll be putting in the street, and then we're also going to be putting in various elements, which I'm going to show you on the next slide. So this is what that treatment facility would look like. The wetland would be across the street, and you're going to see a garden wrapped around the building. For us, that's going to be a demonstration garden. One of our things that we've envisioned doing is putting in low impact development demonstrations. So we plan on doing public-private partnerships with vendors to have them show us kind of the products that they have and partner with the city on filling that space up, hopefully at their cost, we'll see. But that gives them an opportunity to advertise their product. And when we have developers come into the city and we give requirements for them to install things within the public right-of-way, we can say, hey, come over to this project. You'll be able to see what we're actually requiring you to install. And then that way they can work directly with the vendor or find something similar. And so these are just some of the elements that are going to be incorporated in this regional project. You know, water quality and water supply, that was the impetus for getting a lot of the funding for this project. We got $28 million from Caltrans for stormwater quality. And then we started, as part of the Safe Clean Water program, or Safe Clean Water, the Measure W within LA County is a measure that helped provide funding. So they needed multi-benefit, but it's water resiliency. And so the potable water offset features of this project were able to bring approximately $10 million to this project, which we're hoping, cross our fingers, this month gets approved by the LA County Board. The project, we've already begun construction of the project, but we do need that last $10 million to finish. But there are nature-based solutions. We have various shade trees, native vegetation, bioswales. We have that demonstration garden, which I talked about. But really the plant signage and education is really important because we believe in hitting our youth with the knowledge. These are just some renderings of what it's gonna look like when it's all said and done. I'm gonna go through quickly because I know you guys have other speakers after me. And this is kind of our master vision for the document. It wasn't just the project done in isolation where the star is. We looked at other projects in the area and try to focus on a region. And you'll see that where the star is where the plant is, we have a wetlands plan there. To the north, we have an existing park, and to the south, we have an existing park. But we're looking at how can we interconnect these wetlands and enhance our existing spaces and do this as sort of a large regional effort. And then you're gonna see a long strip here going to the south, and that's a thin strip. Right now, that's just an area by our levee that's not being utilized. So what we envision is to the very far south, there's a county pump station that pumps water directly to the river. Instead of doing that, we said, we plan on working with the county, putting that water flow in a swale, and that swale would take it to the Long Beach Must. So instead of conveying that water through a pipe, we're saying let's convey it on the ground through this nature-based solution that's going to be able to treat the water naturally, and it's going to reduce our treatment cost. And so in this next slide, you know, I want to share what some of the challenges why, you know, I know complete streets is something that a lot of cities are pushing, and it's a big effort. But for us, when it comes to complete streets, when trying to implement complete streets on roadway projects, the funding is typically limited. It's limited by the funding that you have, and there are higher priorities. You know, pavement is a huge thing throughout cities, throughout California. I think the average city is doing fair, and most cities are doing poor with regards to managing their pavement. So that's where the bulk of the funding needs to go to. The city of Long Beach, we were sued with regards to accessibility and sidewalk. So we actually have, I think, a $300 million need to address our sidewalks. So, you know, either we can spend that money on trees, which for us is a nice to have, or we can spend the money on sidewalks, which for us, if we don't take care of it now, it's going to increase our financial legal obligations in the future. And then also active transportation. And ultimately, we have to look at the cost benefit of implementing street projects versus in a linear fashion versus larger regional projects like the one I talked about with LB Must. And so what we're looking at is larger regional projects and looking at how can we get funding towards that, because with those multi-benefits, it's easier to get funding. It's easier to get partnerships. And it's also easier to get grants when you're leveraging funding from different sources, such as transportation, parks grants, stormwater grants, and using all those together. So currently, you know, one of our major opportunities is this stormwater treatment plant that we talked about. But now we have another one called the El Dorado Regional Stormwater Capture Project, where we plan on working with 10 different cities, capturing that water in Long Beach, and then working with the Orange County Sanitation District to capture that water, do some preliminary treatment through natural solutions, and then put it into the county county sewage system for treatment, which will help with water resiliency. And I think really, you know, moving forward, it's looking at it from a bigger picture and a bigger perspective, and how can we get more bang for the buck and leverage multiple sources of funding together. And I know that was a lot. I was trying to go in and stay within my 10 minutes. So with that, I'll turn it over back to you, Pavitra.
Thank you, Alvin. That was, a broad range of projects from, distributed green streets to regional projects. Thank you so much for sharing. With that, I'd like to pass it on to Ms. Susie Wiest, who will be sharing her insights.
Can you see my screen? Okay, let's hope it, oh good, it will. So good morning, everybody, and thank you very much. Thank you, Pavitra. We're gonna switch gears and now we're gonna talk about some of the trees that are going into these projects. And as Pavitra mentioned earlier, I am involved in new products. So a lot of the trees I'm going to speak about today are new, but then I have some favorites that I call tried and true. The first one, this is actually one of our new trees. This is an Albizia julibrisson that, this is a very exotic looking tree, and it has a beautiful umbrella shaped canopy. They grow very quickly to about 30 feet, and I understand that they have been considered invasive in some areas. However, what I like about this tree is these will work in areas where some other trees will not. They love a tropical and subtropical climate, but they will also thrive in those very hot, dry climates, and they're very adaptable to a wide range of soils. So like I said, where other trees will not grow, very often an Albizia will. The foliage on this one, Ombrella, is very dark green, and it has a beautiful fern textured foliage. The flowers, oh my gosh, they're so floriferous. They have these very large cherry pink powder puff shaped blooms, and the stamens, they're just full of these silky stamens. That's how they get the name, the Persian silk tree. This is a tree that is extremely low maintenance. And I know that very often you have projects where you do not have a crew or a lot of resource. And so this is one of those trees that really doesn't need to be pruned every year, maybe once every 3 years to be thinned out. If you're going to want to do it during late winter or early spring. And this is one where you will want to make sure it has some space for that big wide canopy. It's also, the flowers are very fragrant, so you might want to put it in an area where people can appreciate that fragrance. I imagine this also as a park tree because of that umbrella shaped canopy. I just imagine people having a picnic beneath it, and the flowers, again, they bloom profusely all summer long. Really, it's really a gorgeous tree. And then next, this is one of the tried and true trees. This is a very beautiful, and what I love about this tree is it's a very clean tree. This was actually, it's a hybrid between Bauhinia purpurea and variegata. This was discovered it's actually on an island near the ruins of a home on an island right on the shore in Hong Kong. It was named after their governor at the time, who happened to be a great plant enthusiast, Sir Henry Blake. And it's also considered one of the most beautiful trees in the world, and it became Hong Kong's floral emblem in 1965. I happen to love this tree. I have a personal love for it. Yes, the flowers are gorgeous. They're about 5 to 6 inches wide. They are a deep rose pink. They are also sterile, so they're not going to set seed pods. But this tree provides extra interest even in the leaves. The leaves are double lobed and they look like little butterflies. And when I was growing up, we had one in our backyard, and we still refer to that as the butterfly tree. So it's a really nice tree. If you would like to see it in action in San Diego, I've seen it used in some parking lots in the La Jolla Renaissance area, in one of the little shopping centers there. And it always looks nice. And when it's in bloom, it goes into bloom pretty much late fall through midwinter. And the leaves drop for a very short time, and that's when it blooms. This is a really interesting tree. Also, it's a low maintenance tree. The only pruning you'll need is maybe to give it its nice round form when it's really, really young. Really beautiful. Now, this is one of our most exciting new varieties. I want you to look at that photo, and this has an amazing display of like multiple colors all on the same branch. So after the pink blooms, the new growth will emerge a burgundy red, and then it begins to turn shades of bright yellow, then gold, copper, and also kind of a lime green. And they're also very much less susceptible to leaf scorch. This is the result, it's actually a real breakthrough. This is the result of a breeding program from a man named Denny Werner at the J.C. Ralston Arboretum in North Carolina. And he has bred many different Eastern Redbuds. And I think this is going to be probably his claim to fame. I'm really excited about this one. It's only about 15 to 20 feet tall. I would use it as a focal point that if you can imagine it for our smaller urban spaces, you could even plant it in mass. Notably, it was selected as the People's Choice Award for Best in Show at the Far West Show up in Oregon. And the reason was because it was so beautiful while also being low maintenance. So as a redbud, it also has those, I call them adorable, heart-shaped leaves, and it's an excellent habitat plant. So the hummingbirds love the nectar of the flowers, and also the birds love the seed pods. So this is just a really nice plant, very stunning. Now, Merlot is also an Eastern Redbud, and it is very similar. It's got that beautiful burgundy color. It's very similar to Forest Pansy, but this one has Texas Redbud in its chains. And what that means is it's going to be even more drought tolerant. It has a thicker, glossier leaf. It actually stand up better to the summer heat. The new growth comes out a really deep, deep purple. Then it matures to a burgundy before turning to kind of a muted dark green. What I love about this tree, because of the burgundy color, it adds that dramatic color and contrast. And the burgundy color, I find, really pairs well with some of the lime greens that you see in the landscape. So for example, you could plant Lomander Breeze below it, or maybe an Acacia Cousin It. This is an understory tree, so they can take some shade. I'm also picturing Mahonia Soft Caress, that gorgeous, gorgeous texture. Anyway, that is Cercis Merlot. Oh, I also want to mention, because we do field test these trees, and I've been observing this tree for about 3 or 4 years now. And one thing that is of note is it has a very strong juvenile branch structure. So when I compare it to the other trees in the nursery, that is one of the things that I've noticed, which is also a real plus. Bonsai Blue Jacaranda. I don't know if Jacaranda has been made the city tree of San Diego, but I know that there was discussion of it. Jacarandas are gorgeous, gorgeous trees with those deep purple tubular flowers.
It actually is, just I'll chime in, it is the city of San Diego's recognized tree.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so with that, there are times where the regular species is just too big for an area. But, you know, our urban spaces are getting smaller. This is Bonsai Blue, is the first compact jacaranda, and the way it came to us was through, it's actually an international effort. A man named Mr. Sakai, he was breeding jacarandas, selective breeding, and what he noticed about this one, it was much more lush and it bloomed at a much younger age, in addition to being compact. The propagation of this is onto the regular species rootstock. And as you can imagine, it's not a very easy task. So he found somebody over in Israel named Omar Hochberg. So They are cleft grafted in Israel and shipped over to us on a boat twice a year. And then we root them out in 1 gallon containers. So it's a very special tree. The other thing I love about this tree is you can grow it as a multi-trunk, or you can also grow it as a standard. We have some 15 gallons in the nursery. I expect at maturity that they will grow to be about 18 feet tall. You can use this as an anchor in a landscape. You can also put this in a terracotta pot, if you can imagine them in some courtyards. Really, really beautiful. They also take very, very well to pruning. So where you cut, they just immediately lush out. They're semi-deciduous in California. The one I was growing at my house, it completely defoliated, but I noticed that it came back very quickly and in a very, very lush way. So really, really nice, very exciting tree. We have plenty in the larger sizes out of the nursery right now. And then the last tree that I want to share with you is from one of the top breeders of Lagerstromia in the world. His name is Dr. Carl Whitcomb. And what he is famous for is breeding Lagerstromias that are disease resistant and also reblooming. So this one, this can be grown as a large shrub or a small tree. So we are growing them as standards. We have them in 24-inch boxes, and they grow to about 15 feet tall. What is remarkable about this tree is its clean green foliage. It comes out with a reddish tinge and then turns to a very lush dark green in the summer. And in the fall, it has a vibrant orange-red fall color. The blooms, it's very, very prolific in its bloom. These large panicles of these fiery red blooms, they just cover the tree and very, very uniformly. This particular variety has very high mildew resistance, so I think it would be excellent for even some of our coastal areas. And they're very heat and drought tolerant. You can use them in inland areas as well. Very, very water wise. I think they're gorgeous when they're planted en masse, because that's when you really get the effect of those blooms. And then finally, I just wanted to speak a little bit about using the right tree in the right place. So, trees, they provide many, many benefits. So they clean the air, they filter runoff, they provide shade and habitat, they increase our property values and improve our overall health. But you have to use the right tree in the right place. And so I just wanted to put down a few little notes on how to do that. There's a picture of one of the ficus and encinitas that's been, there's been a real hullabaloo in our town about the ficus because we love trees and it's hard to remove them, but when you don't use the right tree in the right place, it can create a lot. I'm sure all of you know better than anybody. Just a few things to consider when you're thinking of what tree is, what kind of space do you have? How is it going to be used? What kind of traffic? Is it a downtown area? Sun, shade? Is there going to be irrigation, or are you going to need a really drought tolerant tree? And maintenance resources. So some of the trees that are very low maintenance that I mentioned, the Bauhinia and the Albizia, actually the Cercis are quite low maintenance as well. So those are some things to take into consideration. Deciduous or evergreen, most of the time I am asked for evergreen trees, but I'm going to give a plug here for some deciduous trees. Deciduous trees, all trees lose their leaves or lose some part of themselves all year long. So you're not going to ever have a tree that is litter free. Deciduous trees just happen to do it all at once, and then they come back all nice and fresh. And I love that they let light in the winter and then they shade us in the summer. The dimensions at maturity, those vary. I'm often asked, well, how tall would this tree get? Well, I'm going to give you the answer. It depends. Very often you'll see a range. And sometimes it makes me laugh when I see a range of 15 feet to 60 feet. That would probably be a Rus integrifolia. It just depends on where it is. So it depends on how much water it's going to get. You can hold trees back. I mentioned Albizia Ombrella, Julibrisna Ombrella, was considered an invasive tree in some areas. But again, they work in areas where a lot of other trees don't. In the right situation, holding back the water, they'll be just fine. Considering the function and the form, And as I mentioned, the exposure in the water and soil requirements. I just want to say one other thing about tree selection, and that has to do with diversity. And it's a great idea. A lot of municipalities have learned the hard way when they use too many of one tree, and you have maybe an insect or a disease that comes through and it affects that one tree, then they're going to lose all of their trees all at once or have an issue with them all at once. So I think that using a diverse palette of trees in a community area is a good idea. You'll notice to the left, there's a book, A Californian's Guide to the Trees Among Us. I'm giving a plug for Matt Ritter's book. Before COVID, we had him scheduled to speak at one of our events. And I just can't say enough about this book and how it's very good to have a nice reference lab. Because you know what, even I look up a lot of information on trees because you just can't know everything. And I just wanted to point this out as an excellent reference. So putting the right tree in the right place creates a nicer environment for everybody, less maintenance, and more success. Also, final thought, when you are doing a large project on trees, contact me about the possibility of a contract grow. Again, this is just about how to ensure success with your project and just to make sure that you get the most quality tree and that you get the variety that you actually want. Many times landscape architects will create these gorgeous designs and then the plant material isn't available at the time of installation. So that's just a little plug for contract grows. So everybody go out and get that book, Trees Among Us by Matt Ritter. It's an excellent, excellent resource. And I'm going to send it back to you, Pavitra.
Thank you, Susie. I love the philosophy here, the right tree for the right place. So thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Pass it on to Mr. Sean O'Malley.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm going to have my colleague run the show for me because I'm in a remote location at the time. So Ryan, as he's starting the show, I want to talk a little bit about, so I'm a landscape architect and urban designer, and about the role that trees play in our projects. And they play a variety of different roles. This first shot is from where our office is, Laguna Beach. I'll come back to this a little bit later. Next slide, please, Ryan. So the public realm is the anchor of our projects, pretty much. As an urban designer, as a city planner, I think more often than not, designing what connects us is really becoming, particularly in light of the pandemic, as an accelerant of the importance of that public realm. It's becoming very, very important to all of our clients, the cities that we work with. And it's always been a focus of our work, of course, being kind of a landscape architectural-based planning firm. This is a shot of the largest streetscape project in the United States that I worked on in Anaheim, which is really a transformative project. Next slide, please, Ryan. And as the public realm, trees are really the most important element of that public realm. In this case, the role that these trees played was more of a ceremonial, transformative role. It really transformed this entire district of Anaheim and ended up being the most successful public-private partnership in the United States. That's between Disney and the city of Anaheim, where the city could borrow the money, Disney underwrote and guaranteed those funds. And it resulted in the largest increase in hotel tax revenue, of course, not recently, but pre-COVID. And it pretty much had paid for itself many, many years ago after its implementation. The right tree for the right project, a good point, Susie. This one actually was to try and create a statement, and that's what they're looking at, is trying to create that resort feel. We brought in 1,000 full-grown date palms from Indio, from the Salton Sea area here, after they were done producing their crop and they get too tall for the pickers. We were able to kind of recycle these trees, I think, and find a new life. So these trees are living again within the city when before they were, giving us food. Next slide. I'll just run through a variety of projects. Ryan, why don't you just keep moving? Santana Row, all these trees play a remarkable role in creating the setting for these public, pedestrian realms. from both a large scale we saw in Anaheim to the small scale here in Guthrie Green, City Creek and Salt Lake City. These trees were actually planted on parking structure. Katy Trail, which is really the transforming of a rail line into one of the most popular public places in Dallas. Buffalo Bayou, this is the largest landscape infrastructure project in the United States. We're currently working on implementing over 150 miles of restoring what was a concrete channel into a beautiful linear park, making what was once the back door of Houston into the front door. Here's a slide showing the extent of that system, of the Buffalo Bayou system, where it's really become a catalyst for redevelopment throughout Houston, and has reconnected its citizens to the outdoors with a series of trails beneath a more natural planting of trees. It's contrasting to Anaheim and Houston. The tree planting here was about the native species, the cypress and so forth, and replanting those that can take flooding, as you know, and also removing the materials of hard, paved materials, the concrete that used to occupy the channels to increase, of course, the absorptive capacity. And it has reduced insurance costs in those homes and neighborhoods that front the bayou that has been worked on and changed by reducing flooding in those areas. It's already been proven after 2 major hurricanes, a lot of follow-up studies. So the role that these trees have played into control erosion in the bayou and also increase the absorptive capacity of the soil, extremely important. So here, a very important transformative role in the city of Houston. Next slide. And so now we'll talk about my hometown here, Laguna Beach, which started as a kind of an action plan to really look at a tree replacement program, because, you know, trees, like people, grow old and they die, and they get sick if they're not the right tree in the right place, right, Susie? So we were together with our arborist and other specialists, really look at the trees of Laguna and their current conditions, which are not good at all. No irrigation, mostly, you know, just really suffocating in these sidewalks and compactions of the tremendous pedestrian traffic they get, which is a great thing, you know, right? And then at the same time, how can these trees start to be the anchor for this public realm, and how to better that public realm, increase its width, create more, you know, gathering spaces, et cetera. Next slide. So it became a much larger project than simply replacing trees that have been hit by a vehicle or struggling because of disease, because they're not getting enough irrigation and the compaction and so forth, and all these different conditions that they've been able to survive remarkably. That's what's impressed us the most about some of these trees. Next slide. And so this is just a graph showing specifically how many trees we're trying to, politically, as Alvin had mentioned, you know, removing trees is a challenge, even if it's an old ficus tree that's not in the right place, right? And the roots are ripping up the sidewalks and clogging the sewer lines. But as we begin to replace trees over time, kind of a phased replacement approach for the city of Laguna Beach, you know, what those species are, that's extremely important, of course. And also working with the character of Laguna Beach. And just as San Diego and Long Beach have very specific characters that you want to work with, you know, so does Laguna. And Laguna, of course, started out as a eucalyptus forest. Forest Avenue is named after that forest where the artists originally kind of made their homes back in the 1920s. So we're increasing the amount of trees here. Next slide. And in so doing, hopefully, as we move forward with Pravita's help, we can employ silvacells in key locations where we're taking up the sidewalks, gives us an opportunity to, you know, remake that soil condition beneath, and Pravita can really describe this better than I can, but increase the health of the tree, not only the biofiltration and water retention capabilities, but the health of that tree so it can survive, you know, our changing climate and more extreme conditions, and less susceptible to disease. Next slide. And so this is kind of a shot of how we foresee Forest Avenue, which might be a little different again, and I'll get to that in a moment. Next slide. So Forest Avenue is kind of the main street of Laguna, and this is the existing condition. Well, it was existing pre-COVID, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Next slide. And so then how the street can incorporate more trees of a similar character, perhaps not the eucalyptus per se, that we currently have, but trees like agonis or other kinds of species that invoke that same kind of beautiful character of the eucalyptus. And also gathering spaces and new plantings and places for people, because ultimately these trees are about creating places for people, increasing the shade and the livability of our streets. Next slide. Okay, now we have our current state of affairs. Next slide. And so we were asked to look at this very street, Forest Avenue, the main street of Laguna, and how we can help out local retailers and restaurants. Next slide. And that involved really creating a pedestrian-only experience, of course, blocking the street to vehicles, as a lot of cities have done now, including Long Beach and parts of San Diego, expanding customer seating, engage local artists, really leverage the eclectic character of Laguna and that artistic spirit that we have. Next slide. And so, some of the analysis drawings of looking at, okay, who's a restaurant and, in red, and then who's dealing with merchandise and apparel that you see in blue and retail. So there's different kinds of shops, of course, along any successful, shopping street and eating street in California. Next slide. And on the left, what was the existing condition, and then on the right, how that condition can be transformed, which started out as kind of a temporary solution, but now in talks with the city, it might become something more permanent. Next slide. And then we're actually adding more trees, you can see in that slide. So again, the trees, I think, are the anchor for the comfort and beauty of the place. So this is just only some of the specifics of, we'll just go through these quickly, Ryan. The crown of the street, places for gathering spaces with some separation from pedestrian traffic, also places for retailers to bring their wares outside. Next slide. Keep moving. And then, displaying some of the art and providing a separation from the vehicular traffic, canopies, overhead canopies for shade. Next slide. Night lighting, all these things that kind of, it's like decorating our living rooms, basically, our outdoor living room of the city. Maybe places for play. And then once you stay here just for a moment. Our plan sketch here showing the blue things are umbrellas and little decks, gathering spaces for eating and dining, and the purple is for retailers. So kind of a mix so we don't forget everybody on this street, and then perhaps our performance decks. But then in brighter green, of course, adding more trees to the experience. Next slide. And of course, the seating diagrams for safety. Next slide. So, what was the pre-existing condition? I almost said, and then. Opening day, you can see that everybody's just loving it now, and the bollards in the foreground, we kind of covered those using the help of a local artist. Did incredible work, really popularizing the California landscape and the sea life on the other side. You can see the fish of California looking out towards the beach. Next slide. And we got a hold of an old lifeguard Jeep to act as, instead of bollards. We thought this was a much better solution, more in keeping with the character. And then now we see the smaller trees and paired with the eucalyptus above, and creating these decks and places for people to sit, different kinds of seating. Next slide. Okay, just keep going. And then popularizing some of the local surfers. These are folks from the community, done in murals on the street there. And it's really become a great place, both morning and evening. I take my oldest daughter here with her friends, and it is packed. I mean, almost to the point of it's unsafe. And so they've been having a kind of a hard time keeping folks out. And just anecdotally, there were a couple businesses that were kind of against this idea of closing off vehicular traffic, particularly the retailers, but they're actually say they have doing better business now than they were before. I think because folks they're keeping the shops open late at night, and as they're waiting for their dinner reservation, you know, they take a look and see what's what's available in the shop, and really make an entire evening out of it. Again, I think it's the trees here that set the stage and create the framework for our public realm. And working with everyone here on the call is extremely important. I'm just an implementer of your science, of your hard work, I think, and trying to put that in the ground, bring it all together. So I think we have a lot of work ahead of us, but I see a tremendous opportunity now, seeing the pandemic as kind of an accelerant of people beginning to really realize how important the public realm is and the role that trees play in our streets. Thank you. Pravita.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sean. That was great. And especially where you talk about, you know, the value of facing within the projects, where you don't have to chew everything, you know, a large chunk, and how you can build that momentum with face. Like you started with something temporary as part of the project and further build it on. I think that's very cool. And it's a key lesson learned and insight that we could all carry on and take with us in our respective areas of work. So
awesome. Yeah, if I could chime in real quick. So Pavitra, sure. We're about 15 minutes over schedule. I know you're still to present. So just to kind of sure. FYI, if we can, as quick as you can. So.
Oh, absolutely. I can tell my story in 5 or 10, you know. No
okay.
problem. So I'm going to share my screen here. Oops, share. Let me know if you're able to see my screen. Okay, great. The emails are nonstop, but are you able to see? Are you able to see my screen? Oh, great, thank you.
Yeah,
so again, right away, we heard other speakers, you know, where they shared about what is the ideal conditions. You know, we talked about right tree for the right place. We talked about, you know, what are some of the considerations we would have in place in terms of the size and the capacity that a tree would need. Having said that, you know, we still live in urban setups. You know, those are ideal conditions, and that's where, you know, there is limitation in terms of space restraints. And so that gives an opportunity for us to explore what type of technologies are out there, where even with limited space that we have, what is the best that we can do in terms of having healthy tree growth. And at the same time, like Alvin was talking about, focus on multi-objectives, you know, be it, you know, enhancing urban tree canopy or water quality improvement or capturing the stormwater and sustainability and reducing heat island effect. So that's the story here, a little bit about our firm, Deeproot. We are a global water technology leader. We have been in the market over 25 years, and we have installed over 2,500 projects across the globe, headquartered out of San Francisco. And the case behind it is the normal trees, the urban street trees that we see, is that the traditional planting, where on the left side of the screen, you see where the soils are heavily compacted. And compaction can be criminal for tree growth. So what Silva Cells, our technology, provides is this vehicle that can hold lightly compacted soils, about 60 to 65% maximum, with just walk-through compaction. At the same time, the cells provide the structural integrity that the paved surface above is going to need. So we can retain that parking stall, or we can retain that pedestrian-friendly parkway. At the same time, you know, let the tree grow and attain its maturity. And here is an example of other options. You know, as there were some audience questions where they talked about, what about bioswales? What about other filtration techniques? One of the things is right away, this is space taken off the surface area, right? We're in Southern California, and that's an additional parking lot, parking stall that can be used. And not to mention all the excessive operation maintenance that go with it. You know, just to be dramatic, you know, you could have a dead cat, you know, right there clogging up that bioswale, you know, sorry, cat lovers, that could just clog up the entire function of this best management practices on site. So you have systems such as silver cells. This is a picture that consists of different components, and they are compact, they are underground, and they provide this, this robust bioretention strategy of both managing stormwater and promoting these roots to be able to grow within favorable conditions of good soils. There's water and air that can go through it. So they come in different sizes, basically to just simplify the difference between each of the models, 1X, 2X, 3X is basically the depths, which directly correlates to the soil volumes. So within a silver cell 1X unit, roughly speaking, we're talking 10, 20, 30 cubic feet of soil volume that you would get within a unit. So think of them as Lego boxes. This is a quick profile, just to show you how the silver cells are packed in between aggregates, both below and above them. And then you have the pavement on top of it, the paved surface. And silver cells are compatible with different types of paving. You're working with asphalt or permeable pavers, or your concrete pavers, or your digipads. So it's really compatible with many of the different types. And here is a quick layout, to show how silver cells are laid out. And the red lines that you're seeing refers to the tree opening. So you can see how cells are laid between tree openings, and that provides opportunities for trees to co-share, good high quality soil volumes underground to be able to have this robust green infrastructure network. And this is exactly, the key point of silver cells. It allows for walk-through compaction. So you're not bringing in a compactor where you're compacting to 90, 95%, that kind of misses out on the opportunity on how trees can be this incredible engine, treatment engine, part of your BMP train that can take in, suck in all the nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, instead of them ending up in the end of pipe treatment facilities where you're trying to treat it as a pollutant. So using natural solutions to be able to achieve sustainability. This is just a quick picture where silver cells are assembled and ready for soil fill and just simple walk-through compaction. Here are some quick show of projects in our region. This is the Armor Light Drive in San Marcos, where again, it was one of the examples that Alvin had shared, where, transforming an industrial yard, a maintenance yard, into a living, with multi-family unit dwelling units along the street. This project won awards from APWA, American Public Works Association, and over 80 trees were installed. And this was, a minimum of about 500 cubic feet of soil volume per tree, which is really the key, the magic there, supported by silver cells. And you can see how utility pipelines can navigate and travel through these cells and be able to bring in the runoff, that from the storm drain to navigate through these bioretention cells. So this is how it looks now 2 weeks ago, in terms of their growth and how they're able to mature well. Here is another street along the Burbank Water and Power, Lake Street. Again, it goes to show when you compare now and the adjacent trees adjacent streets without them, you can see a clear difference in temperature. And as we all know, LA County is a fast growing warming region, and shade is a critical equity issue. And we need communities, that can be flourished with street lined with trees, shady trees. Here's another project again in San Diego, National City, where silver cells were installed along the Blue Line trolley station. And you can see how silver cells right next to the station waiting area is useful for pedestrians and, transit users, as a shade. And this is another project. This is part of the Del Mar downtown, Camino Del Mar downtown corridor project, where silver cells went under both of the sidewalks, both of the sides. And it was used as both a stormwater BMP in order to meet the city's MS4 permit requirements. In addition to that, over 40 trees were planted, and we had folks from the County of San Diego now approving silver cells as part of their Green Street Design Manual to support trees and green infrastructure implementation. This is the Los Angeles County, the new courtyard in Alhambra, where they have silver cells to support a half a dozen set of trees. another green street application along the public right-of-way in Santa Monica along Cloverfield Boulevard. So basically, as you can see, these are different applications with different sidewalks that we are working with. We would all like the ideal situation where you have the enough room, you know, but what happens is we're limited by the limited size of the swale, or we are limited by the area that is allotted to it, that we can still leverage these technologies like silver cells in place to still achieve those dreams and building our complete streets. Here's a project along the waterfront in Toronto, and we are mimicking the success here in our backyard in San Pedro, Port of Los Angeles, where we're doing both the promenade and the town plaza, installing trees and supported by silver cells. This is in Toronto. This is another project out of Illinois. It's a stormwater project where you can see trees both as, you know, a way for building urban tree canopy, but also managing stormwater. Project out of Florida, Miami, Florida. And you can see how narrow the sidewalk is. So key takeaways. Number one, as all the speakers talked about, it's always multi-objectives. And that's how we are able to leverage multiple funding opportunities, you know, multiple stakeholder groups, bring them to the table, consensus building. So we have projects that can speak to different objectives and funding needs. The second aspect is the ease of installation of this technology. It's not like rocket science where you have to change the design. Silver cells can fit in, you know, given your approach is filtration or infiltration, you know, depending on which mode you want to go through, and allow for this light compaction. At the same time, not compromise on the paved surface and its functions that we want to have above surface. And the third is maintenance. You know, this is a big ticket item for our agencies. We want to be cognizant of that. And technologies such as silver cells enable a low maintenance or no maintenance as long as it's installed right, and be able to leverage trees, our urban street trees, as an effective treatment train. And of course, you know, enable and receive credits from regional boards as a suitable bioretention technology. So you can also satisfy your MS4 stormwater permit requirements. So thanks again for this opportunity. I'm really thrilled to be part of this panel, and hopefully we can all start collecting all the Q&A questions and forward it to the speakers and help respond to those. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Pavitra. Yeah, there were some questions that did come in. Vince, do you want to maybe kind of read those off and see if we can get some responses?
I think maybe given the time, we'll just send them over via email, and then post the answers on our webpage and Facebook and LinkedIn accounts. Okay, let's do that then. We'll go ahead and send these off to our speakers. But thank you all for presenting. We really appreciate it. We appreciate your time and your expertise, and I think it's going to lend great value to a lot of the participants that we have on the call today. So we're going to take a brief break. I know it's kind of in the middle of lunch hour here, so if everybody wanted to go grab a snack or a lunch or something, we'll probably jump off for about 10 minutes. It's about 12:30 now, so maybe we'll jump back on at 12:40, and we have just a few things we kind of run through, and we'll probably open up the mics a little bit, let people chime in, see how that goes. But let's just take maybe about a 10-minute break and regroup here at 12:40. Okay, sounds good. Talk to you in a bit.